Chapter 7 of The Whistling Mountain by Mary Dame. When David grew quieter, he began to feel ashamed of the trouble he had caused. 9 years old was old enough to know better. And besides, his father might have been really hurt when he fell off that horse. No wonder he hadn't taken him down to Swiftwater. David made up his mind to tell his father that he was sorry, and after that he felt better. Still, the day seemed very long. He expected that his father would remain angry, but when Mr. Dunn came in for supper, he gave David a friendly smile and a pat on the back. When they had eaten and the lamps were lit, he listened with interest while David told him about the bird that had taken all his crusts. "I think I know the one you mean," he said, "but let's look it up, shall we?" And putting his arm around David's shoulders, he looked through the bird book with David until they found a picture of a blue jay. "That's it, that's the one." "Good for you. The blue jay is a handsome fellow, and you'll see a lot of him. Did you notice what a harsh voice he has? Not a singing voice at all." David nodded his head. "He screamed," he said, "Jay, Jay." "It won't be long before you know the names of all the birds and animals in the park. You'll like it here, really you will. It's just that everything is so new to you and so different from city life." "But Dad, I do so many things wrong, and there are so many don'ts." "There always are, son, even for your mother and me. Now it's your bedtime, and I'm going to bed too. We've had quite a day of it, you and I." In the middle of the night, David woke up. He was sure he had heard something. He opened his eyes. He could see nothing in the darkness. He reached out and felt along the wall for the light switch before he remembered that there were no light switches there. He lay back on his pillows and tried to figure out what had awakened him. He was still very sleepy. And then he heard something scrape and crunch, and it was right underneath his bed. His eyes opened very wide indeed. Crunch, crunch. Something was chewing. When the noise stopped, David sat up in bed very slowly, very quietly. His eyes were getting used to the dark, and he could see a little better. There was nothing in the room. Outside his window, Whistling Mountain loomed big and black. It looked most unfriendly. It could well be a home for grizzly bears as well as for marmots. Grizzly bears? Oh gosh. Maybe one of them had come down from the mountain and was under the house and trying to get in. David crawled under the covers and shut his eyes tight. The noise stopped, and he kept his head covered a long time before he dared poke it out again. It was a bit lighter, and not nearly so scary now the noise had ceased. Everything was so quiet he could even hear the branches of the pine trees swishing in the breeze. The clock in the kitchen ticked steadily. He could hear his mother breathing gently in her sleep, and his father's deep snores. Perhaps he had been dreaming. David turned over and curled into a ball with his knees up close to his chin. He got sleepier and sleepier. Oh, there it is again. It was a real noise, a very real noise, and it seemed to be right under his bed. David forgot all about being brave, and he jumped out of bed and tore as fast as he could into his parents' room and wriggled into bed beside his father. Mr. Dunn woke up in a hurry. "Whatever's the matter with you? It can't be morning yet." "Daddy, I heard a grizzly bear. It's under the house, and it's chewing its way right into my bedroom," David stammered. "Oh, what's that? You've been dreaming. It's the middle of the night." David's father reached for his flashlight and turned it on. "Now, what's this about a grizzly bear coming into your room?" "Well, something woke me up. I reached for the light switch and there wasn't any, so I tried to go back to sleep. And then I heard this chewing sound right under my bed. It was very loud." David tried to sound brave, but he did not succeed. "Oh, for goodness sake, you probably heard a mouse chewing in your cupboard. Now back you go to bed and forget about it and let me get some sleep." He stifled a tremendous yawn. "Do I have to go back there?" David begged in a voice that was not far from tears. "Oh, let him stay, Bill," Mrs. Dunn suggested sleepily. "It is rather dark with no streetlights, you know." "Well, all right then, but lie still and don't bother me." Mr. Dunn turned on his side and was fast asleep in a few minutes. David lay still. He lay so still that he began to hurt all over. And then his foot tickled, and he didn't dare scratch it. He listened again to his mother's gentle breathing and the heavier breathing of his father, but they were familiar sounds. He was listening for the chewing to begin again, and he stayed awake for some time. He must have dozed, for it was broad daylight when he was wakened again by the noise, which now rang clearly through the quiet house. "Dad," he whispered urgently, turning over and pulling at his shoulder. "There's that grizzly trying to get in again. Listen." Beside him, his father groaned, turned over on his back, and sat up. He looked angry. Mrs. Dunn sat up too and yawned. For a moment, David was afraid he was going to be punished. The noise was very loud. "Why, I do believe there is something, and it seems to be coming from under the house. It's not a grizzly bear, but I'm going to find out what it is." Mr. Dunn quickly got out of bed. "May I come too, Dad?" David inquired, much bolder now that it was light, and his father was going to be beside him. Mr. Dunn beckoned him to follow, but to be quiet. Fairly bursting with excitement, David pulled warm clothes on over his nightwear. "Aren't you going to get your gun?" Mrs. Dunn asked from the shelter of the bed. "Do be careful, both of you." They went through the quiet kitchen and opened the back door. It was damp and very, very chilly, and David shivered from both cold and excitement, but he wouldn't have gone back inside the house and let his father go alone for anything. David followed his father on tiptoe as he went down the back steps and around to the side of the house, right under David's bedroom window. Mr. Dunn took his flashlight from his pocket, and getting down on his knees, he shone the light in under the timbers of the house. "Look, there he is," he laughed, wiping the mud from his knees. "He's a little small for a bear, isn't he?" David knelt beside his father and looked. He was excited, but he was afraid too. He didn't know what to expect. Certainly he didn't expect the black, bristly creature, no bigger than a large cat, which sat blinking in the light of the flashlight as he stopped his leisurely chewing of a post supporting the cabin floor. "Gosh, what's that?" David whispered, not quite ready to laugh. "That's a porcupine. He must have found salt on that post. It happens sometimes when a workman's hands have perspired. Now you hold the flashlight and we'll poke him out of there. I think I've got a box we can pop over him when we get him outside. Then we'll take a good look at him after breakfast, before he's had time to chew his way out. Now careful, keep well back. He's got wicked quills in that tail of his, and he can slap it around if he gets mad." David was too excited to feel the cold now. "Can I keep him?" he begged, as the box was popped over the porcupine and weighted down with a stone. "No, of course you can't. He wouldn't make much of a pet. He's too stupid. Besides, it's against the law to keep wild animals in captivity in the park, and we have to see that laws like that are kept. Now let's you and I go inside and light a fire and make some tea to take it to your mother. She'll be wondering what we found." That's the end of chapter 7.